All right, on to our next panel for the day. We're actually going to stick to the wonderful world of SME banking. And small business owners already have plenty on their plates, right? They have tons of stuff that they need to worry about. And many of them are actually having to use a multitude of tools and different providers to run their business day to day. And as a result, they're having to spend an awful lot of time managing their financial lives and dealing with financial admin such as bookkeeping, tax returns, services that effectively could be and should be easily automated. So businesses can actually spend more time focusing on running the business and growing the business. In our next session, we will explore how a serendipitous, I love that word, a serendipitous meetup at Money20 last year formed the basis of a relationship between a bank and a fintech to really raise the bar in service differentiation for SME. Please welcome the moderator for our next panel, Olivia Minnick, editor of Fintech Alliance, who will lead a great discussion with a phenomenal panel, including Becky Danks from Comma, David McHenry from Silicon Valley Bank, and Roland Selmer of Yapily.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Who here is a little bit hungover? Yeah, some hands. Excellent. Well, that's fine, because we're going to start with a bit of a joke, just to warm everyone up. So a bank and two fintechs walk into a bar. Oh, no, that's not the joke. That's actually the context of the session. Sorry about that. So this session's about serendipity, as we mentioned. It's also about supporting SMEs. So we talk a lot about financial inclusion, and you might be thinking about individuals who are underbanked in different countries around the world. But small businesses are still chronically underserved by traditional finance. So we're going to talk a little bit about how these guys are hoping to solve that problem. So Becky, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a little bit about Comma, what it does. Give us a bit of context around that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Comma is an open banking bulk payments platform. We work directly with SMEs and accountants, and basically anywhere where they need to make many payments in one go, we can help them through our app and API integration. But I think it's really important when we're setting the scene for how Silicon Valley Bank and Comma started working together. It was actually Yapily and Comma's relationship. So Yapily is our tech provider, and we basically were the first people in the market to be using the bulk payment open banking endpoints. And quite quickly, when you're the first people to do something, you realize that not all services are created equal, and often you have to go through the trials and tribulations of figuring out how stuff works in real time. And quite quickly, after a few kind of months of working on the big banks, the CMA9 banks for open banking, we realized that there was definitely some good examples and some bad examples, and learning what the gold standard might be for an open banking bulk payment relationship between a bank and between fintechs. So last year, when we came to Money20, we ended up through the Money20 matchmaking app being connected to David at Silicon Valley Bank. And really, basically, we're able to share some of those insights that we'd found. So really found kind of kindred spirits, I would say, in terms of saying, this is what we can create for customers if we do it in the right way. And that was the start of it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. It's a Money20 love story, which we're going to talk about today. But Roland, can you just give us a bit of context around Yapily and also around why you think it's so important to use technology to support small businesses?
Sure. I wasn't part of this holy union because I wasn't here last year, but I do have a kicker at the end of the story. Maybe it's good to start with what value Yapily as a open banking provider brings to customers like Comma, just beyond the typical payments and account information services. So we do the heavy lifting in three main areas. That's mainly access, so integration to thousands of banks through a simple abstracted API. We also obviously manage the highly scalable, highly available platform that allows them to build their applications on top, and also tooling. So we provide great developer experience tools that allow them to integrate the API. And I think those are the reasons why Comma chose Yapily to integrate for their bulk payments use case. And we have some quite good stats already. So we've done over 12 million in payments so far, over 10,000 payments across their use cases with invoicing or payroll or bank B2B payments. And I think, kind of to what we're talking about SMEs today, their customers saving significant time in their finance teams of SMEs. But the kicker is that Becky and I used to be colleagues. So we talk about all this technology and platform, and these are necessary but not sufficient conditions to be successful. But it ultimately comes down to relationships and the humans involved, I think, which makes this kind of partnership special.
Yeah, definitely. And I can tell you guys from backstage, it's clearly very natural, kind of friendly relationship that we all have, which is good. David, tell us about this time last year, coming to Money 2020. What were you seeking, or were you looking to find partners, or did it happen by chance?
Yeah, I mean, 2020 has always been great for being in the room and getting to see what's going on and connecting. And with everything that was going on, it was actually, we connected through the app. I wasn't even here. We weren't able to travel internationally, even though I'm based in the UK. So it was through the app that we connected. And even before that, about a month or two before that, the great Simon Taylor has a weekly newsletter he puts out, and Comma was mentioned as one of the companies. And I remember reading that and saying, well, that for open banking, that's a thing that really answers some questions and some needs for our clients. So we work with technology startups that then are scaling up and moving globally and then going and becoming public. And at that later stage side, they have incredibly dense financial technology stacks. They're using NetSuite, Oracle platforms, Treasury workstations, and they have the staffing, they have the money to invest to automate their payments and their payroll and everything like that, and whether that's through direct transmissions or APIs or global Swift integrations. And that's an effort. At the other end, for our startup clients that are in that SME space that use platforms like Xero or QuickBooks or Sage, like it was said before, they don't have the time, and our clients don't have the patience for clunky processes and things like that. So when you read about what Comma is doing, of being able to plug into that SME accounting platform, automate things that were basically exporting files and importing them into online banking and then going through an approval process, that they can take that out of the accounting, then through open banking, which is this fantastic scalable way that you can authenticate, approve, and go through it, and use that bulk payment transfer, which not a lot of people were using, and then have that come through the bank. It's fantastic because it makes it scalable for us. It makes it really efficient, and it puts it into that realm of much more automation that our clients and clients of the SME nature are looking for.
And had you struggled to find the right partners previously? What had that been like?
I think it was. I think with open banking, it's all still very early stage. We have a lot of these talks of like, well, when is open banking really going to hit? And we saw activity that was happening. Like it very much did start as a regulated activity for banks. Like we have to build these APIs, and you have to allow a third-party processor to have access to them if they come to the door. So we were already having lots of calls, whether it was information or payments, and there were some like, oh, that's great that it's happening, or we were making sure like the Yapilys of the world, we want to engage with them because they open up the door for lots of platforms like Comma to have a standardization, because you're not going to go to hundreds of banks and try to connect to them. That comes in perfectly. So I think when Comma came up, it was solving such an acute point that we wanted to look at for our clients, that it was something that then we wanted to like jump on and actually say, okay, instead of just coming in and you get access to the sandbox and great, no, let's talk about how this actually engages with the client. What's the whole life cycle, the user experience of it, and make sure that we really nail that, and then talk about it openly as a partnership.
And Becky, in terms of open banking, where are we now? I mean, do you think it's fulfilling its potential? What do you want to see over the next year?
I mean, there's so much I'd like to see, but I think that we're really at a point now where we have certain banks and certain providers who are excelling. They're doing so much and being able to deliver such exceptional customer journeys that we really see the value and the potential there. But not all banks are as open as Silicon Valley Bank to, I think, release the full potential of the capability that they've built internally. And I would love to see more focus from the banking services on the customer journey that they're creating for the customers that we both share. And I think that's the shift in mindset that I'd really like to see over the next 12 months. It's not just a few banks or providers, it's the whole market and the whole banking services realizing that the TPPs and the partners that they're talking to that are working in open banking are making their products more relevant to their customers by being in the middle. And releasing that full potential, I think, is what needs to be seen, because we've got it in a few places, but it needs to be broader.
It sounds like there's still a mindset shift, right? So how has, what's been the challenge for Yapily, I suppose, in getting that message across to, first of all, to Comma, then Silicon Valley Bank, about what you do and what the value is?
Yeah. So maybe going back to kind of the SME topic, if we look at, for instance, like what are the constraints of SMEs? They're typically around time and resources, and probably typically both. So any solution needs to optimize for those constraints. So, for instance, they would need, they very much want to be paid as fast as possible and a low cost as possible with the least amount of friction possible, cash flow. And they also want to make data-driven decisions around how they pay the invoices at, let's say, the most optimal time, cash flow. So these are very important, like looking at how open banking can help solve those problems for those SMEs customers, looking at an open banking provider, having great consent journeys, having great onboarding, large amounts of automation that David was talking about earlier, great documentation, easy API integration. So doing all that heavy lifting that I was referring to earlier, I think that is the quantum of utility that kind of open banking providers need to be operating with. So.
Now, it's quite rare to hear such a positive story about this partnership where it all seems to have worked really well, and I'm sure there have been bumps in the road, which we'll talk about a bit later on. But it's even interesting to hear that it was just last year that you met rather than, well, started it 4 years ago and we just managed to get something up and running. What is it about the culture in Silicon Valley Bank which enables you to partner with so successfully, I suppose?
I mean, I think as I described, I mean, it starts with our clients. We're a really unique bank. You know, obviously, headquartered and based out of Silicon Valley. But now we've gone global, and myself being part of like our UK branch, like our clients are technology. They're startups, they're scale-ups, they're public companies that are all focused on changing the world in different ways, whether it's consumer software, life sciences, our fintech clients, our global funds banking clients who are the investors into all these companies, and we support that ecosystem. So, we get really excited about how are they innovating, how are they disrupting the world, and we want to do the same as a bank. We're a commercial bank. We're a commercial bank that's been around 40 years, so we have a legacy of technology and capabilities, but we're always striving to, meet what their expectations are and drive better engagement, better capabilities, and do that and be there for every part of the way that they scale up. So something like this is a way to then, use these capabilities to allow them to be a lot more efficient, and that's their expectation.
I think it's a great point. There's often this perception, open banking and banks have this kind of adversarial relationship, but I think this is a great example of that not being the case, and it's not always a zero-sum game. And going back to your original question about open banking ecosystem, we heard yesterday banks monetizing open banking. There's definitely the pie is big enough for everyone.
Yeah.
And what is the optimal amount of regulatory oversight which will stimulate growth to get those network effects? For instance, like in the VRP discussion yesterday, we need that. Versus over-regulation, which stifles innovation. So I think that's probably one of the key topics that have been discussed quite often at Money20 this year, and looking forward to it.
And Becky, in terms of partnerships, what are some of the biggest challenges when you enter in a partnership with such a large organization?
There definitely are challenges, and I think that a lot of that comes from, Silicon Valley Bank is an example, but kind of all big organizations have a very set way of doing things in a lot of instances because it's tried and tested and it makes lots of sense. That's how their business works, that's how everyone knows how to operate. But what they lack in that is the flexibility, I think, to reprioritize around specific things that need to happen or specific things that need to change, because they come with a swathe of teams and processes and people that need to be accommodated in all of those areas. For startups like Comma, we're able to be much more focused and dynamic in terms of we need to solve this problem and this is how it needs to work. And I think that the best way that you can, I think, work together on solving those things is be really cognizant of that on both sides, be understanding of the challenges that exist both in a big organization and in a small organization. Challenges for a small organization are things like speed to market and how quickly you can iterate on problems, whereas there's obviously infinite time in bigger businesses to kind of get to the right answer. And I think clear communication, being honest about when things aren't going to happen, setting expectations, and fundamentally, I know I keep going on about it, but remembering that you have the same interests, you have the same customers at the end of the day, and you both want what's best for them. And I think ultimately, by remembering that, you're able to get to exceptional customer outcomes in the right way.
Definitely. I had a conversation with a founder recently about partnering, and he sort of said that eventually you become more experienced, you experience a lot of failures and have to do so many post-mortems that you can then do a pre-mortem. Yeah. And actually at the beginning you can think, okay, what are the key things that could go wrong and how are we going to head those off? So I'm going to ask each of you, what are one or two things to consider before you start the partnership as a pre-mortem? What would you say, Roland?
I think Becky kind of nailed it there. It's setting those expectations. Are we solving the problem that we think we're solving from the customer's perspective, and from a supplier's perspective, do we understand the problem you're solving? Sometimes these are slightly orthogonal, and I think, as in life, all good partnerships are based on good communication and mutual understanding. So 100%, that's a primary.
David, what's on your checklist?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with that one because it is like, if you're just doing it as like a science project, like let's get together and figure something out, it's kind of hard to like keep that up, especially if you run into challenges where you have to like develop through and do some revamps and things like that. If it's just doing it because, well, let's try something together, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like for us with this solved an acute problem for us. And then, from there, it was, it went kind of all the way through our product management team, our API development team, and as we got to the points where like, oh, we need to revamp some screens, we looked at the user journey, there's something we've got to change in it, API team is right on board. They're like, yes, we want to get this to work. And that's not something like, if it's just passive or something you want to try, if that doesn't exist, it's not going to be successful.
Absolutely, and I would just add on to that, to give some real kind of, I suppose, concrete examples of things that I would do at the very beginning is make sure that if you can, be as much as possible an expert on their product as your own. So learn what their customer journey is. Learn about the steps that their users normally go through. In open banking, that's especially important because actually the goal of open banking is to bring API versions of existing customer journeys in online channels. It's not necessarily to provide a uniform experience across lots of different banks, although that's what we hope for. That's what we hope as a TPP for. And when you do know those other products and those other businesses so well, it enables you to catch out when you think things like that screen's not going to work, or they have an extra step in their security profile that we don't necessarily accept as a risk. And I think in that context, getting quite specific up front enables you to see ahead what's going to cause problems, and then you can bring in the right parties of approving different things, removing words, getting UI changes to work with back-end changes. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yeah. It's definitely two-way.
And that, those were the conversations we were having, because they were like, well, why are you doing that validation step here? It's like, well, if you think about on our side, if we don't do that validation step, we're going to kick it back after you've already said that it's come over to us and it's been transmitted and the user journey says, well, why did you just kick it back? So we went through all these things and actually kind of roadmapped and came through it, and it made the solution better at the end of the day.
So coming back to the Money20 love story, I suppose, some people here may be looking for the one, hopefully in a professional sense. What's one thing each of you would say of how we can make the most of these events? Because I think especially after the lockdowns and things we've had, people are a bit more wary of coming to an event, maybe wasting a few days if they feel like they didn't get anything out of it. So Becky, what's your top tip for people?
I would say do your research. So find out the companies that are coming and who you want to talk to. And this is in no way a dig at the people who've put meetings in my diary, but often in times they're trying to sell me things that we don't need. And actually, I'd be much more interested in talking to some people about a product alignment or how we could work together on something that has a co-interest in both of our businesses. So do your research, find out who you want to talk to, find out a little bit about them, and make sure that you have a meaningful conversation with an outcome that you have really thought about before you go into it.
I would agree with that. I think be specific if you're organising meetings. I've had a lot of people say, let's get together and talk about fintech, which is lovely, but it's not as useful for me as other subjects. So what would you say?
Super quick. I think step outside your comfort zone. There's so many different companies doing so many different things here. So we've got this opportunity to speak to humans again, which is awesome. So speak to companies outside of your comfort zone. That's it might spark a new idea. It might spark another holy union. But that would be my advice, yeah.
Excellent. David?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is knowing what you want to get out of it. And, for me, like I cover one very specific transactional banking piece of our puzzle, of our solution set, but it's knowing what is, our FX team, whatever other thing, what are they thinking about, so that in my role that I can actually keep my ears open, accept those invites that come in, do a little bit of research on that company, whether it's way beforehand, but and have a productive conversation. And there's sometimes it's great to hear what you guys are doing, great. This is where we're at. There's other times where, things click, and then it's like, okay, I'm going to introduce you to this person. I'm going to get you to this person and do that. And maybe those are somewhat far between to you have those kind of the meet cutes that we were talking about ahead of this, where it actually clicks. But when you do that, you have to make sure, to make this fulfilling, follow through with that stuff, and then, you will have successful stories that come from there and ideas.
Definitely, and I think we've just got 20 seconds left, so I'm going to give a tip, which is ask silly questions. So don't be afraid to ask people, what is embedded finance, for example? I was asking that the other day. I felt a bit silly, and then I realized no one else knew what it was either. So definitely have those conversations, be confident, approach people, go in with a plan, as you said, and hopefully you'll get another partnership out of it that we'll talk about on the stage next year. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Olivia.
Thanks.